It's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to this side event, which marks the official launch of the guidelines on investigation and prosecution of firearms offenses. Today, we have with us Simonetta Grassi, Chief of the Firearms Trafficking Section, as well as esteemed panelists who bring a wealth of experience and expertise, which will enrich our discourse today. So each panelist had a crucial role in the development of the guidelines and has significant experience in the field of firearms-related criminality. So I would like to take a moment and to introduce them. We have with us Ms. Frédérique Dubois, a French investigative judge and liaison magistrate in the Western Balkans before the Embassy of France in Serbia. We have Mr. Yannick Forbes. Welcome, Yannick. He's Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions in Jamaica. We also have Mr. Johan Gustafsson, Detective Inspector from Swedish Police. And last but not least, Mr. Marcus Dantas, Chief of Service for Countering Firearms Trafficking from Federal Police of Brazil. I think that I got this correctly. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And as we adhere to the planned duration of this event, I would like to invite Ms. Simonetta Grassi to deliver the opening remarks and to share her insights with us. Simonetta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So thank you first of all to everybody to come to this side event in person and also to the many that are connected online. I'm always amazed how much reach out we can have through online meetings. I'm very, very pleased today that we gather to launch these guidelines on investigation and prosecution of firearms offenses, or the guidelines, which bring together the comprehensive, it's a comprehensive knowledge product that was developed by our firearms trafficking section in collaboration with a diverse group of international experts and esteemed partners. Let me just tell you a little bit about this process, because I think it's very revealing of our great cooperation that we have. Over the last 2 years, we have basically worked with approximately 70 experts from approximately 30 countries across Africa, Central Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean, Western Europe, the Western Balkans, to join forces and to unify our concepts and in our efforts to really tackle the most pressing challenges that exist today at the level of investigation, prosecution, at the level of criminal justice systems, in order to properly address illicit firearms trafficking and other related firearms offenses, but also related crimes in general. This is a collaborative endeavor that also brought together expertise and insights from other professionals, from organizations such as Frontex, Interpol, also specialized units like Navies in the UK. And we had 3 expert group meetings during these 3 years. Of course, we also had the valuable support of an excellent consultant that worked with us throughout this entire period. But we had 3 expert group meetings where we met with all these experts, both online and in person. And through these expert meetings, all these I must say, very passionate, very committed individuals submitted written inputs, comments, shared not only their knowledge, but also concrete cases, made comments and comments on successful experiences, but also on challenges, and had really thoughtful discussions. And this allowed us to pool the knowledge and the experience of all these experts together. And these collective efforts resulted in these guidelines, which is a remarkable resource that embodies the principles that are enshrined in the UNTOC Convention and the Firearms Protocol, but that look especially and in particular also at concrete implementation practices, which is something that we often miss. The guidelines provide a comprehensive and systematic approach to address firearms-related criminality, guiding us through every crucial stage of the criminal justice response, from understanding the normative framework, starting to understand how and what do we have to prove in each criminal offense, to effectively conducting investigations, ensuring robust prosecution that would lead to fair and just adjudication of firearms offenses. Let us also not forget that within this context, we're speaking of a threat that is by its nature transnational, and therefore there is also an important emphasis in these guidelines on international cooperation within at all the levels. By recognizing this transnational nature of firearms trafficking, we underscore the importance of collaboration and exchange of information between the states. This spirit of global partnerships resonates strongly throughout the guidelines. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all experts for spearheading this endeavor, for their unwavering dedication, and for their commitment in supporting the development of the guidelines. Your invaluable contribution have undoubtedly shaped this exceptional knowledge product, which will be the framework for our section to provide technical assistance around the world. And I want also to spend the hard work done by quite a lot of our colleagues within the team. We often tend to forget to mention them as well, but this combination of collaboration between experts and our own team members has been really very fruitful. As we officially launch these guidelines today, I would also like to remind us all that this is not the end of the process. The work is just starting, because the launch marks the beginning of our renewed commitment to then also help implementing the guideline. And this is also our collective responsibility to ensure that the principles, the recommendations, the good practices that could be identified and that are contained in these guidelines become really a cornerstone of our national, regional, and international approaches in the fight against illicit firearms trafficking and firearms-related offences. It is, and I think we will hear more from the distinguished experts that are with us today. It is not just the publication, it is really a way to, I always say this, make always this example, it is a way to avoid having to rely on individual good motivation and commitments of individual practitioners, and try to institutionalize an approach that should become something that comes from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to up. It's a change in paradigm in how we conceived our responses to these type of crimes, and to avoid that it really depends on individual persons that decide to go the extra mile and open an investigation when nobody's asking them to do that. On the contrary, we hope that through the institutionalization of the guidelines, and we will see and discuss how this can be done, we can contribute to really change, well, in a long-term perspective, investigative and prosecutorial approaches to this issue. And I am filled with optimism as we embark on this important journey together towards strengthening the criminal justice systems by expediting the implementation of these guidelines. And I want to thank you all for your attention, and I'm looking forward to today's deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simonetta. I would just like to echo your comments and remarks regarding the wonderful spirit of cooperation that we fostered during the process of the guidelines development. Your dedication certainly shaped the guidelines in their final form that we have today. And without any further ado, I would like to briefly present the final version of the guidelines and to inform you that the final version has been printed. We have it here with us, and we'll give you a couple of hard copies for your further reference. So, in line with the firearms trafficking section's mandate, the guidelines are emphasizing the importance of addressing the criminal justice dimension of illicit firearms trafficking. And if we go through its chapters, we can see that we are opening with the first chapter, which explores the firearms control regimes at national, regional, and international level. We also present the relevant provisions of UNTOC and compare the national framework of firearms offenses and the related offenses under the firearms protocol. Then we continue with the following chapter, which shifts focus to the key firearms and organized crime offenses. The chapter considers the definition of firearms, components, ammunition, providing comprehensive understanding of these elements, and discusses the key offenses and points that needs to be proven in order to establish the guilt in the criminal proceedings. We also heavily considered the investigation of firearms offenses through the prism of proactive investigative approaches, overviewing the crime scene examinations, ballistics analysis as well. Firearms tracing both domestically and internationally is extensively covered. We encompass procedures, identification of firearms, markings, challenges, and we listed all valuable resources which could assist the practitioners in effectively tracing the firearms. The chapter also covers the interrogation of the suspects, interviewing the witnesses, search warrants, financial investigations, and collection of electronic evidence as well in the firearms-related offenses. And the chapter concludes with a case study that illustrates the importance of proactive approach in tackling cross-border firearms trafficking. We also touched upon the modus operandi of firearms cases and recent and developing trends. We examined the different methods used in trafficking and illicit manufacturing, discussing the type of evidence generated, the recovery of locations. We further delved into the trafficking by land, by sea, by air, as well as trafficking via the internet, including the clear and the dark web. Of course, we went through the aspect of illicit firearms trafficking through express, courier, and postal parcels, because as long as we go through the deep or dark web, the firearms, its component or ammunition needs to be physically put in a packaging to reach its final destination. The guidelines then concentrates on the international cooperation within its 5th chapter. We introduce the relevant provisions again of the UNTUC and Firearms Protocol to explore formal and informal ways of cooperation and the mechanisms on which states are interacting with each other. And the chapter, of course, emphasizes the principle of information sharing and outlines the challenges encountered in the international cooperation. We have also considered firearms-related criminality and its nexuses to terrorism and the organized crime. We explored the links between the organized crime groups and terrorist groups and firearms trafficking, their use of firearms naturally, and we provided the principles and best practices for investigating firearms trafficking in the context of terrorism and highlighted the challenges in investigating and prosecuting firearms cases involving organized crime groups. 7th chapter is on the prosecution and adjudication of firearms offenses. We explored the role of the prosecutors, comparing the civil law and the common law systems. We explored the challenges encountered in prosecuting firearms offenses and presented the prosecution techniques and approaches, including the evidence presentation before courts. We discussed the witness testimonies, defense approaches, and the post-conviction considerations and the sentencing principles, as the adjudication is a very important aspect in addressing any criminal cases and including, of course, firearms-related criminality. Through the last chapter, we also listed the strategies that we find comprehensive in the sense of the implementation of the guidelines. The strategies have been developed around the inputs that we obtained from the practitioners during the 3 expert group meetings, and that will certainly ensure their practicality and relevance. And the primary aim of these strategies is to facilitate the national implementation of the best practices that we identified within the guidelines. As we definitely need to adhere to the duration of this side event, I would like to continue with the panel discussion, and we prepared a couple of topics for engagement with the experts. And I would like to perhaps start with Yannick and Marcus. Maybe we can go forward with the virtual interaction first, and then we'll proceed with Frederic and Johan. So the primary topic that we identified and around which the guidelines were developed are the major challenges in investigating and prosecuting illicit firearms trafficking and related crimes. So I would like to ask the panelists, what are the major challenges in your state or region? What causes those challenges, and how can we address these challenges? I would like now to invite Yannick first to share his insights with us and to hear something about Caribbean region and Jamaica context, and then we will continue with Marcus. Yannick, if you don't mind, I would give the floor to you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much, Dimitri, and thank you very much to Simonetta and the team from the UNODC, and in particular the Firearms Trafficking Section. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to give perspective from my own country and certainly the Caribbean region in general. The primary challenges that Jamaica in particular has, and the Caribbean on a whole, I could limit them to three main challenges. Firstly, there is the challenge with the legislative frameworks not according with present realities. There is the difference in legal systems between our Caribbean countries and the countries in which these firearms flow from. And generally, there is a lack of standard operating procedures and a national strategy and focus on how to tackle firearms trafficking and the related offenses. In respect to the first challenge or major challenge which I spoke of, which is the legislative framework not according with present realities, certainly in recent times, Caribbean countries, no less Jamaica, have embarked on ensuring that their national legislative framework accords with present realities to account for trafficking as an offense, and as well as other offenses such as stockpiling and other main offenses which are part and parcel of the root cause of crime generally within the region. I always say that the statistics give us good context, and when you look on Jamaica, for example, which has over 1,400, almost 1,500 murders, with over 82% of those murders being committed with the use of a firearm, it is very important that you have a strong criminal justice response, and a key tool therein is the legislation which you have to tackle firearms trafficking. So you will see that since 2022, Jamaica has introduced a new firearm legislation, which is in accordance with guidelines and international standards and practices. So that is a major challenge, or that has been a major challenge. And the region, Jamaica and the region, have been taking steps to overcome that challenge through dialogue, through cooperation, and adopting of best practices. In respect to the differences in legal systems, the majority of our firearms, which are in the Caribbean, flow from North America. And what you'll find is, in order to tackle the root cause, which is trafficking, oftentimes there's a difference in the legal requirements in these North American territories from that which you have in the Caribbean. And therefore, when you trace the firearms to their origin, you find that the investigations may stall. And therefore, the prosecution of trafficking as an offense and trafficking as a phenomenon is hampered, because the cooperation which you would normally get to prosecute is not there because of this difference in legal systems. So, for example, in the United States, there can be easy sale of weapons, and those weapons which are sold eventually find their way into the Caribbean. And eventually, when we trace those weapons to the United States, the investigation goes cold, because there is no proper system to account for the last point of diversion for these weapons. And thirdly, just generally, there has been a lack of strategy and a national focus on how we treat with the root cause, which is trafficking in general. One can understand with almost 1,500 murders and a murder rate of almost 52 per 100,000, that the focus is on the predicate offenses, which is your shootings, your murders, your robberies. But there has been a lack of focus on the root cause, which is the firearms being trafficked into the region generally. And because of the other challenges, there has been no focus placed on this particular aspect. So those are the three main challenges. And I think certainly having the guidelines is a great step in the future, because you now have a comprehensive body of work, a comprehensive scholarship, which provides primarily strategies and experiences from different nations. And these strategies, experiences, and practical approaches.
Sorry, Yannick, sorry for the interruption. You're anticipating my next question. Perhaps we can forward to the neighboring Latin America and sorry for that, but definitely we're reaching that stage under the second question. Thank you so much for valuable insights. We really appreciate that. And I would like now to invite Marcus Dantas to share his insights with us. Marcus, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your invitation to participate in this awesome side event. And about this question, I have thought about some challenges in investigating, prosecuting firearms and related offenses. First, the lack of legislation harmonization in our region. I think that the role of the foreign firearms control agencies, if they have or not a good registry system, for example, in which we have the existence of confident and up-to-date data that can provide fast responses, for example, in case of traces. I think that the issue of if the country is used to use information exchange and international cooperation tools like the Interpol IARMS and I-24/7 from Interpol, or the system to receive and respond to tracing requests, or even, and firstly, more important, intelligence requests from law enforcement, from police, in the cooperation level, in the police cooperation level, or prosecutorial information exchange level. And these are some challenges that are often seen here in Latin America, and I think that in Central American region also, when we are investigating firearm-related crimes. Another major challenge is how to initiate investigations of firearms trafficking. Not only because of the number of cases of actual illicit international trafficking, but the lack of the knowledge of the legislation regulations on the country, on their own country, about the legislation that they have about controlling firearms, or what is illicit or not. And this can cause some kind of problems, because almost all the norms in our civil law system here in the region, they have to be written. They have to be previously written, and they are very technical, and sometimes they are administrative norms that have to be known to fight the illicit firearms trafficking. Another one is the lack of the modern legislation that effectively adopt standards foreseen international conventions. As an example, legislations with provisions on the use of special investigative techniques or financial investigation provisions and tools. Since we have a lot of new challenges in investigate firearms trafficking, and the financial investigation in a proactive way is very necessary nowadays. One more issue is the lack of specialized units and specialized practitioners on firearms trafficking team. And also because firearms trafficking investigations are more difficult. They are longer and depends on the collaboration of the magistrates on considering the time and complexity of the investigation. So we have some cases in which we have to run with the investigation because in some countries we have a time to conclude the investigation. And since they are too long, too complex, sometimes we cannot deliver or receive the necessary international cooperation information. That's what I have thought about, and there are a lot of other challenges. And since I mean it is a new kind of crime that some countries are starting to face in the last years. There are a lot there is a long way to go with this theme, and the guidelines is a very important tool for us in this sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much, and I'm particularly grateful that you touched upon the international cooperation at the beginning, and I'm remembering the case study that we have in the guidelines, which talks about the firearms produced in the Balkans being recovered in Latin America, which proves that firearms trafficking does not know any boundaries. So maybe this is the moment when we can return from the virtual world to the actual one, and maybe we can go with ladies first. Frederic, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri, and thank you for all the huge challenge you managed to face on these guidelines, and thank you for the invitation. So I will start first with two common observations. The first one is the lack of knowledge, as the former speaker says, lack of knowledge in our daily duties as prosecutors or judges, because it's technical, it deals with forensic. Also, we need to collect data, and we need to have a support with experts, because we are not technicians, we are only judges and prosecutors. The second common observation is, as a liaison magistrate and also as a former prosecutor in EU states, all the weapons trafficking, they are linked with other offenses, most of them linked with drug trafficking and also with THB human trafficking. So we always need to think during the investigations, will we put everything in the same file, or will we share and we're gonna keep the drug trafficking case, and we're gonna open another file only for trafficking in firearms. So these are two common observations. And after, of course, I will share everything that has been said before. First, we always have transnational cases. So the problem is the harmonization of the legislation, and not only harmonization, because I'm thinking about indictment and after a conviction and sentence, is to know all the common components of the offenses. That is really important. You can have different legislation, and in some country it will be sentenced by 10 years, I would say. But what is trafficking? What kind of weapons? You know, we have different sorts of weapons, so and ammunition. So we should have a common base. Second challenge is to detect the criminal networks, because it's always difficult because it's transnational, and also to have efficiency in investigations and prosecution facing the modus operandi's evolution. We always need to have intelligence and to know how it works, you know, because it's nearly the same in the dark web and using the social media. So efficiency in investigations is linked with collecting evidence. What kind of evidence is, for example, is how could I say, is agreed in one country? What we need in another country? Everything is always a little bit difficult because it's transnational cases. So, and other, I will say, other challenges. Sharing intelligence and case law is really important. So maybe a major challenge is to create reference, you know, national reference and have some reports, but I will say it after. And also, I really believe, as a former trainer for prosecutors and judges, I really believe that we need common trainings. We need to share experience. We need to have how could I say, to explore and to examine all the files that were sentenced, what was going on, what was great, what was wrong, etc. We need to have common trainings with police officers, with experts, with judges, with prosecutors. I won't say with the defense lawyers, because we are not doing the same jobs, but it's not. So that were the major challenges I wanted to point out for, and to just to add with the few speakers, the two speakers, my Jamaican colleagues and the Brazilian one. I think we have some common links together. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Frederick. And we remain in Europe, and I will switch to Jochen. Jochen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm honored to sit in the panel, and it's a great job you've done with the guidelines. According to Sweden, we share it into domestic challenges. We see that we focus on possession-related crimes, and we don't investigate firearms trafficking as much as we should. If I can mention a metaphor, so we scope water out of a leaking boat instead of plugging the hose. And the guidelines assist us to be better in plugging the holes. Internationally, Yannick and Marcus and Fredrik has spoke about that, and that I can just add to that is that the guidelines will help us, assist us to even, it is easy to see what faults there is in other countries' legislations, but the guidelines helps us to identify loopholes in our own legislations. So it's not very just important in investigations, but also in legislative work, because I've never seen a product like this where we can see how other countries do in such an easy way. So it will be very valuable even in legislative work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jochen, and thank you for mentioning the legislative framework. We are definitely heavily engaged throughout the world on legislative harmonization and aligning with the UN Firearms Protocol, which gives us a uniform definition of illicit firearms trafficking and manufacturing, which covers all the aspects that would be perceived as firearms trafficking. And we are behind the agenda a bit, and we will continue with the second question. we'll make another round, and I would like to hear from you how can the guidelines help promoting common approaches and best practices in dealing with firearms-related criminality, and how can the member states integrate this investigative approaches into their own national practices? As the guiding questions, I would like to invite you to share with us your opinion on what are the strongest points of the guidelines, and what would be your advice for further utilization of the guidelines in your country or region, and what approach you perceive as the most effective one. Maybe we can follow the same order. I would like to start with Janek. Janek, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dimitri. So certainly in respect to the strongest points, I was caught between, I'm a prosecutor who also facilitates the work of the central authority. So certainly the chapter on international cooperation, chapter 5 is particularly helpful because it gives the approach and strategies of different countries, and an important aspect of firearms trafficking is that it moves from one place. Usually, in our context, it's from one other state into our region, and it's so important to dialogue, to collaborate, and to cooperate with international partners. And that chapter sets out different forms of cooperation, international cooperation, which is absolutely critical for us. There is also that chapter on prosecution, which is, as a bread and butter prosecutor, is absolutely important for us. And I think chapter 8 as well, you know, just having those strategies placed in the guidelines, which one can touch on, adapt or adopt different strategies which work for different countries. That is absolutely important for us. And I think chapters 7, 8, and of course chapter 5 are the strongest points. In respect to the second question, which was asked, how can it be used? And I agree with Johan just now. I think that it's perhaps most important for us to plug the root causes of trafficking, to focus on trafficking. And certainly we have had the buy-in in our country. Just yesterday, I spoke with the head of our National Police Training College, and there has been buy-in to incorporate these guidelines and the digest which will follow into the initial training for your police officers. And so that is absolutely important. In addition, one of the strategies is the establishment of national focal points. And I believe that approach is taking shape within our region. Certainly in St. Lucia, currently, the firearms trafficking section is doing work. And just yesterday, St. Lucia published certain steps that they have taken in respect to setting up their national focal point. So I think that sort of incorporation of the guidelines as literature for training, as well as the strategies, is key to us moving our fight against firearms trafficking generally forward.
Thank you. We can hear you. Oh, thanks a lot, Janek. We thought that you had problems with the connection. Thanks again for sharing your insights and praising the guidelines. It's the result of your effort, certainly, and the rest of the experts who supported us in this. And Marcus probably has something to add on these two points. Marcus, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I believe that the guidelines give us a comprehensive approach of the need on elevate the international cooperation as a mantra when investigating firearms trafficking, not only because it is a transnational crime by nature, but because without the union compromise of the law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies of both of or more countries involved in the firearms trafficking case, it is impossible to give a proper response to this type of crime. First, because it's important to find the source or the origin of the trafficking of these firearms, like if it was diverted by stores, diverted by importers, diverted by legitimate owners, if it is an organized crime group acting in the transit, in the movement of these firearms, if it is straw purchases, and any kind of diversion that happens in the other country where the illicit trafficking started. So this can only be done with the support, actions, or initiatives of the source country. As example, starting an investigation on how that firearms illicitly appeared in the other country, in a third country. So in this way, investigating and prosecuting crimes without cooperation, information exchange, I think is almost impossible. That's what the guidelines show us. From tracing to financial investigations and included evidence gathering, evidence collecting, international cooperation is the first of all, the first point that we have, and that's what the guidelines show us. The second best point of the guidelines is that with a huge amount of detail and illustrated case examples, and I thank for mentioning a lot of cases of Brazil, practitioners will have real cases in which the investigations, diligence, actions were successful in a efficient way. So it will avoid that investigators and prosecutors spend time on testing options or repeating procedures that often will bring no results, for example. And we have examples in which certain options that were adopted may really bring fast results for most of the cases. So I believe it will be like a valuable shortcut for an investigation plan, as we have mentioned in the guidelines. So I think these two points are very important in the guidelines. It will be like a shortcut, a really shortcut for any investigator or prosecutor that want to get a case along. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Indeed, guidelines are quite focused on firearms tracing, and then that's what we are promoting to focus on the illicit sources rather than the firearms itself and the primary crime that we see at the first glance, so to say. So thanks again, Frederic.
Yeah.
Can you reflect on these two questions?
Yes. In a few words, I will say that in France, we are completely fond of guidelines, and we have a lot, but we don't have, we have numerous ones, but we don't have a guideline about firearm trafficking. So it will be really useful because, as I told you, we are not specialized. And this guide is so complete that you can find every answer of every question you can have when you're prosecuting or you're asking some question, are we in a huge trafficking firearm cases, or is it only one weapon that was seized? It gives also methodology about investigation, and that is really interesting. And case law that you can use before the court, even if it's not a national case law, but it gives example that is really useful, because as I told you, we can always learn from foreign countries, including collecting evidence and sentencing. So it can be useful, and I'm sure that it can be useful for the French judges and prosecutors, because we are not specialized. And I hope that with these guidelines, we could change our practices. We can learn each other, we can change our practices about collecting evidence, going on more and more, maybe sharing the files and going on. And for example, sharing some investigation with foreign countries where where you know that the suspected, I would say the boss at the top of the network is leaving, for example. So that will be really, really useful, because as Jan said, we are always focused on drug trafficking, and I know that it's a main issue for our countries, but because everything is linked, it's really important. And I know that you know, the criminal organizations say that quite more often they won't be sentenced for that or for a small, I would say, a small sentence or a fine. And so, you know, when you know that the sentence will be less than the other traffics, you can go on, because you know it's kind of impunity. So that's really important, and that's it. I won't.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for reflecting from the perspective of France. I haven't mentioned that we translated the guidelines since the initiative started in the Western Balkans. We translated it in the Western Balkans languages. But in addition to that, we translated the guidelines in French and Spanish. And who knows, maybe we will aim at translating it to Swedish or Portuguese, maybe to
just throw it to
yeah,
provocation.
to see where is the room for further actions. And again, thank you for underlying that we are sometimes blinded with the primary crime, and we are not looking into illicit firearms trafficking as such. Thanks again. Johan, I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you very much. You asked what the strongest points of the guidelines are, and I say it depends. It's many strongest points, because it depends on who is reading it. But from our point of view, the Swedish police, and when we are in the start of the introduction of the firearms focal point, this is a way for us to. We take many steps in one way with these guidelines. It's very valuable for us in many ways. I think, as Simonetta said, we have to see this as a starting point, because that we have to do. That we understand that we have to do is to pick these guidelines down to the national conditions. So we have to format it into Swedish conditions. I don't think very many police officers and prosecutors will read the whole guidelines. That we experts have to do and put it in a simple way to them for understanding. I think a very big value is that, as I mentioned before, it's sensitive to claim problems in other countries, but the guidelines make it okay to do that, and it says it's the most important thing to talk to each other. Because the objective for all of us is to stop gun violence, and to have that in mind, I think that's very important. So so even to start in nationally to analyze judgments and legal cases is very important, and this is the starting point to do that, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johan. And obviously, we're spending a lot of time with our experts, and they're anticipating our questions and they're anticipating our plans. So, as you said, we indeed intend to customize the guidelines to the region's specificities and to work more on the checklists. We had a discussion before the meeting, and you saw the firearms tracing checklist, which would be useful for operational practitioner who is working on a specific case, and we shall definitely look more into that. With that, I would like to close the panel discussion and open the floor for questions and answers for our experts, either from the room or from the online participants. So please, if anyone would like to ask a question, to pose a question to our panelists, please go ahead. Please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I know we are running out of time. Very briefly, my name is Mauricio Zapata. I come from the Ministry of Finance of Mexico. And as you might know, this issue of trafficking in firearms is a very important issue in Mexico, a priority issue in our country. And I am very pleased to learn that the guidelines have been already translated into Spanish, and really congratulations on doing that, because I think it will certainly help us Spanish-speaking countries to improve our coordination and our collaboration in this regard. So a huge thank you for doing that. Thanks and congratulations to the Global Firearms Program. Thank you to the panelists for their insightful presentations. And I think what we have to do now is to promote to share that these guidelines have been already prepared and disseminated with our colleagues. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. I just want to say, I was hoping there is no other side event, but there is, so we definitely have to respect the time. And my daughter is calling me. So just wanted to say very, very quickly, when we tell you that we would like to customize the guidelines, is because we are very much aware that there is a risk that this remains a beautiful document on the shelf. If we don't work with it, if practitioners don't work with it, and if they don't see what does it take me or to make them a living practical tool. So some very good ideas came. I recall Yannick speaking also of the police academy. We are already in contact with some countries also to see how this can be included into curricula, but at the same time, we are leading. But at the same time, also plan to work at country and regional level on how we can, taking the context into account, make them into operating procedures, instructions, whatever the format is that it takes, so that it can then really be applied and eventually also measured what kind of result or achievement can be obtained at investigation and prosecutorial level. So that's all, and I really would like to thank all of you. I would love to talk more, but people are already outside waiting for us. Thank you for everybody. Back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Simonetta. As you said, it's 2 p.m. and there is the next side event scheduled. So thank you so much for